We just got finished with one of the wildest playoffs I've ever seen. This weekend was really famous for one thing. And it was, I'd say, the collapse of the NFC East. We saw the Cowboys go down like we've never seen them go down before, which is actually saying a lot, by the way. We saw the Eagles have one of the worst collapses of all time on national television. So, did the wild card round live up to the hype? I thought the regular season was a little bit boring. You had quarterback injuries, and you had some primetime matchups that were just really dreadful. And no team was really doing something crazy. And then all of a sudden, you have these amazing playoff matchups. So many storylines. You had Matt Stafford coming back to Detroit. You had the Browns versus Texans, which is like the Deshaun Watson Bowl. You had the Chiefs versus Dolphins, which was like Tyreek Hill's return to Arrowhead in one of the coldest games ever. You had Packers versus Cowboys, which is just kind of a famous rivalry in the playoffs. So these storylines were set in place to just be really riveting from the start. And the problem is there were a lot of blowouts. 5 of the 6 games were determined pretty much before even the start of the fourth quarter. And that one game that wasn't was a really phenomenal game. So my question is, are the playoffs saving the season the way they need to? One of the things I did not like about the wild card round is that we saw the elimination of the Cleveland Browns. And that's not inherently bad because that means we get to see the continuation of the Texans season led by CJ Stroud. However, this was actually really bad because we saw the end of the Joe Flacco insanity run. And that means we saw the end of this defense dominating the league. And that means next year we have to go and watch Deshaun Watson start again. This Browns team was starting to be really likable after Deshaun Watson went out because you can't really root for a team that's led by a guy like that. So when Joe Flacco came in, it's like, okay, we got Joe Flacco off the couch and we have this really dominant defense all through like multiple guys going on IR. It's a really likable story. And the Browns obviously are not known for their playoff caliber football. So for them to clinch the playoffs this year, it was like, okay, here we go. And with this defense being the best in the league, I really thought they were gonna beat the Texans. And I'm upset that they didn't because like I said, next year, who knows if they're gonna be that good again. And they're gonna be probably starting Deshaun Watson again. So this defense, it was leading the league in points allowed, leading the league in first downs allowed, leading the league in third down conversion. And they actually allowed the fewest first downs since 2010. So here's the thing. The Browns have been in this weird like zone where they're like a fringe playoff team for like the past 4 or 5 years. And that's because they've had guys like Myles Garrett on the defense who changed the game. And the thing is, with the contract that they've locked themselves into with Deshaun Watson and with the prime of Myles Garrett being probably shorter than we think it's gonna be, I think the Browns are on a one-way ticket to being dog shit again, which is obviously typical for the Cleveland Browns, but it's upsetting because it's just sad. So my prediction is that after this wildcard game, the Browns are not gonna get back to the playoffs next year. And before we know it, they're gonna go back to being the worst franchise in the NFL, which is pretty much what they were through the entire 2010. However, on the bright side, we get to see the continuation of the Houston Texans and CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud has probably already had the greatest rookie season of all time, and the cherry on top is that he's already won a playoff game, so they're just playing with house money. They had a year of evaluation, and what they know is that their coach is their coach of the future. Their quarterback is the quarterback of the future. Their young receivers are the young receivers of the future. So it's amazing that we got to see a team pretty much solidify themselves in a place to be successful in the future. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of those like Super Bowl contending teams for the next like 5 years, you know, with the Bengals and like Ravens and that kind of tier of AFC teams. So that's the positive side of that game. Obviously, the game itself was a blowout. I think the implications of this game are actually a lot more grand than we think. Moving on to the NFC. One of the most important things that happened for the trajectory of the NFC is that we saw the Eagles get the shit kicked out of them after having one of the worst regular season collapses of all time. They were in a position to even take the #1 seed in the NFC, and before our very eyes, they plummeted to the #5 seed and a loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in devastating fashion in the wild card round. I think the only thing that could have possibly happened that could get the Eagles coaching staff out of Philadelphia was this result. Many people are kind of hesitant to put the blame on Nick Sirianni for this loss, but if you look at what happened to the team, it's not a matter of personnel, It's a matter of leadership and coaching that led to this collapse. If they put up a good fight or if they even won, I don't even think it would be possible that the coaching staff would get replaced. But now that this happened, I would not be surprised if they replaced the entire coaching staff and even fired Nick Sirianni and stuff like that. So for the rest of the NFC, this is probably the best thing that could have happened to the Eagles for this very moment. Obviously, the collapse itself was very devastating for the team, but I think if you're a team like the Cowboys, it's like, oh shit, now the Eagles are mad. Now the Eagles are going to make some changes. They know they're better than this. And let me rattle off some stats. In 2022, the Eagles outscored their opponents by 133 points in total. In 2023, they outscored their opponents by only 4 points. And again, like I said, they're the only team to go 10-1 or better and not even win a 12th game. They allowed the most yards in the wild card round, excluding the Cowboys' garbage time yards. And get this, they were the third worst team in points allowed per game in the NFL. Last year, they were 7th best in that category. So this collapse is really unlike anything we've ever seen before. During the last 6 or 7 weeks of the season, they were genuinely one of the worst teams in the entire league. Okay? During the last 6 games, they had a point differential of -59. The Carolina Panthers, the lowest team in the NFL, had a point differential of -61. Jalen Hurts, in that stretch of time, he had a passer rating of 77. That ranks like between 40th and 50th among all quarterbacks league-wide who played this year. And that is sandwiched between Jimmy Garoppolo and Zach Wilson. That is how bad Jalen Hurts played down the stretch of the season. So offense declined, the defense declined, the record declined. And because they played like one of the worst teams in the league, everybody is going to be under scrutiny and under question. And that actually might be the best thing for the Eagles Super Bowl window, because if they want to maximize what they have next year, it's going to take some massive changes to make that happen. Now, the thing about the Buccaneers is like they are doomed. I think they're the only team where it's like they're a lock to be eliminated this weekend. They have probably the worst quarterback in the playoffs, the worst coach in the playoffs. They have the worst record in the playoffs, and they have the lowest ranked defense of the playoffs. So it's very fun to root for the Buccaneers right now, especially Baker Mayfield. He's proving a lot of people wrong this whole entire season, but I just don't see any way in which they can outplay the Lions, especially in Detroit. So this loss meant a lot for the Eagles, but it really just kind of sets the Buccaneers up to be like a very middle of the road team again going into next year. I think there's actually so much significance that this wild card round is having on the trajectory of the playoff team. And for that reason alone, I think the playoffs have lived up to the hype. And we're only getting better matchups. We get Bills Chiefs next weekend. We get to see Packers versus 49ers next weekend. That was just kind of me rambling. Thanks for watching, I guess.